Welcome to Cut the Bull, an insightful podcast which addresses the news of the day and the cultural issues plaguing our society, bringing logic and context to these topics and discussing solutions too real for mainstream pundits. Now, here are your hosts, Charles Love and Wilfred Riley.
Hello and welcome to Cut the Bull. I am Charles Love alongside my co-host Wilfred Riley and our technical advisor Sour Patch Lids. And our guest this week is Peachy Keenan, freelance writer. She writes for The American Mind and The Federalist, and author of the new book Domestic Extremist, a practical guide to winning the culture war. Peachy, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Charles. My pleasure.
It's great to have you. Why'd you run Will away? Will's back.
Good. Nothing really going on, guys.
So the culture war, there's been a lot written and a lot of talk about that. I mean, most of us here have written, done our fair share of work in the space, yet you found a way to address it in a different perspective. So why the book and why talk about this topic from the perspective of women?
Yeah, it's sort of like a, my anti-feminist manifesto. And I wrote it because I personally experienced like a huge 180 in my life. I started off in my early 20s as a full-blown, half-baked feminist. I was, pro-choice. I was, thought abortion was healthcare. I wanted to spend my 20s avoiding pregnancy, avoiding having a family, avoiding marriage, just kind of having fun as a sort of single solo, girl about town. And it wasn't until I, got married, I found a husband just in time and had 5 children that I realized like, oh my goodness, like they really sold me and a lot of my friends a pack of lies. So that's where the book is about, where it came from. And now I call myself, I'm not a domestic extremist. I'm really just extremely domestic, and that's where the book title came from. As like a stay-at-home mother of 5, now I'm a devout Catholic, and obviously I'm like a political conservative. So people look at me, liberals, and think, oh, she really is an extremist, because these are extreme things to do now.
Right. Now, now I can scratch that one off the list because you talk about it throughout the whole book. Have more kids, have this kid, have this. Then I had another one. You never really said how many. So now we know there's 5. Okay, 5 is the number. So
5.
So the book, Liz, is a thorough takedown of feminism. And I know we recently had a nice in-depth conversation about feminism, women, and all of those things. And so tell us what your take on the book and Peachy's approach was.
So I was looking at the reviews alone, and I was looking at some of her writing on her Substack and having a great time because she touches on topics that I'm super interested in, like surrogacy. And she talked about Barbie just the other day, and I talked about Barbie tonight. And I view Peachy as one of my personal role models. I was trying to get her on my show before this came up. I saw this opportunity.
I beat you. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I know. I was like so excited to finally have a chance to talk to her in person.
Because
I was like, so when I was 21, I tried to get a doctor to tie my tubes, right? Which is basically a permanent sterilization. And she said, no, you're too young. And I think of that often when I'm looking at some of these doctors encouraging these young kids to take puberty blockers today. That was about as liberal as I got. I was pretty conservative, so I didn't fully convert over from the liberal mindset. But there was a time in my life when I didn't want kids, partly because I had 5 siblings. Right, I came from a huge family. And I viewed myself as having helped raise my 4 younger siblings, and I was like, no, I'm done with that. I'm not really interested.
You were tired.
Yeah, I was tired, and I was like, I would rather just not. I'd rather maybe have pets or something. But yeah, so I completely identify with your viewpoint, and I love your perspective because I think this is how we win. Right? People think I'm crazy, and I'm like, yeah, no, you don't win by going out there and doing what feminists are doing. You win by showing people that not being a feminist is the way to go. So I'm just constantly super appreciative of your work. I was reading the reviews, and you did get you got 1-star review, and I forget what the person said, but they're like, I can't believe this ridiculous trolling. And I was like,
trolling, right?
That's not trolling. This isn't trolling. You're dead serious, right?
Yeah, this is me. This is not a troll. This is actually real, and I am extremely domestic. And like you, I mean, I never I never really wanted to tie my tubes, but I remember thinking like, if I did get pregnant, I would abort it. I do feel like, there, but for the grace of God, go I. Goodness knows what kind of mistakes I would have made. And so, this is control. This is very real. And there are like real stakes here. There are young women we see around us, like the wreckage, what feminism has done to them. Mm-hmm. They're doing bad things with their bodies, to their souls. They have the highest rates of depression and anxiety, and they're like not doing great. Like feminism, you look at the results of feminism in young people, like it doesn't look that great for feminism right now. They're just they got to take the L.
Yeah, wow. They do. Yeah, absolutely.
Will, as the male feminist here, even though Kara Dansky made it clear that you could not be a feminist. Remember, she told you that. Let me just put that out there. You can't be a feminist. But as a guy who often on Twitter and in your polls fights for the women equality and saying that these things that there's nothing wrong with the traditional, the trad wife, but women should be free to do whatever they want. What do you think about Peachy's approach of women leading us out of this abyss?
I mean, I think there's a lot there. Like, so it's a good question. Like, first of all, I think a lot of the trad wife stuff on Twitter, I don't think it's about Peachy at all, but it's just a hustle. Like, it's just another variation on like, I please my man, you can't handle me. You think you're ready, boy? Like, I mean, a lot of those
Peachy,
people,
but
like,
Liz.
But no, yeah, but I think Peachy and Liz are both rock solid people, actually. But no, but like a lot of that, like the Pearl Davis, like I was sparring with some like younger Hispanic chick on Twitter about this the other day. Like when I saw she had her executive booking agent, who I used to use as a businessman, similar firm, but like in her bio, and it was like, all I want to do is stay home and bake cakes. And it was like, I don't believe that that's why you retained Jenner and Block, like, but anyway, so I think some of that's a bit of a hustle. Yeah. And obviously I think like feminism has become almost a meaningless term. Like I would joke at a party, like, because I'm not a rapist, I would never call myself a male feminist, but like feminism has become almost meaningless. There are multiple waves of it. I don't think any of the ladies on this panel would seriously not want to be able to vote or open bank accounts or anything like that. But they're actually kind of segueing into what Peachy is talking about, because there obviously is a point there. There are a lot of ways in which a lot of young Americans correctly feel like they've kind of been bullshitted. So the other day on, again, social media, I got into this long argument when I was in a meeting for my university, actually, that I didn't expect, because I presented just this sort of dry data that the average age of marriage in the USA now is 31 or 32 for women. This is true. It's 33 for men. And the point of peak human fertility is 23. And all these people started screaming at me like, why do you want, how many kids do you want, you sexist bastard? And like, this is one of the few issues I'm kind of to the left on. So it's sort of like a very unexpected response for that. If you in terms of the depression women, what do you think are the elements of kind of the negative modern message or feminist message, if you prefer, that people are getting? Like, what does that consist in? What's the alternative? Like, what should people be doing to find happiness? Like, you're in college, you might want to get married. What's actually going to make you happy? Is it like girl bossing and becoming an HR middle manager? Like, what is it?
Yeah, that will definitely not make you happy. If you ever had a career in like middle management, like I did, a huge corporation, you will not be happy. You're very excited to go home at the end of the day. Why are they so upset, and what will make them happy? I mean, I think that, the anger is real. And I think that when you tell someone the truth, like when you spit the facts, like you are, they get very upset. And I think for good reason, because it does feel like the whole lifestyle that we're kind of giving to young women is like a coping mechanism for like dealing with choices that they're making that are not helping them. And so they have to kind of keep doubling down and like go on the more dating apps, and maybe that'll do it. And I don't need a man. And like, you have to double down to kind of make yourself feel like I've done nothing wrong. This is all good. I'm doing the right thing. This is the way to live. This is the best way to live. I'll get another cat if I start to cry lonely at night, And so you have, at no point can you kind of let go and realize, oh no, what have I done? I'm like, I'm in my late 30s and I want a baby and it's too late. Because the minute you let go of like your little fantasy, it's like a house of cards. It all just crumbles, and like then you have to realize like what the truth really is, and that's very hard. And a lot of people are never willing to kind of face that. I mean, it's scary to think about what you might have lost, what you've given up, what different path your life might have taken. And how do we wake women up? We got to get my book into into the Ivy League libraries as soon as possible.
Right. They do need some kindling for their bonfires, because that's probably what they'll do there.
Right. Yeah. Talk about banned books. My book will be banned right
they
away.
will be book banners, and they will be open about it.
That's
and
right.
Not to beat up on were you going to say something else, Will?
Yeah, just one very important point that I think Peachy just made is like, when people believe something that's basically wrong, they have kind of two alternatives. One is at some point to say, okay, I guess I messed up on this and I'll try to get some of it back. Mm-hmm. And the other is just to cling to it as hardcore as possible. I think you're going to see this a lot with like trans desistance, for example, with a lot of movements that came out of that hard body critical left. But I mean, a lot of the people that are pursuing this idea, like there are lots of trans kids, like people should keep going down this path, I think might be people that just don't want to admit like this was probably a pretty major mistake. That's a tough thing to say.
Well, that's true, and you're right. You and Peachy are both right about you double down and you keep going because you don't want to go back. But not to beat up on feminism anymore. But let's beat up on feminism a little more. So, Peachy said something, Liz, about they're making they don't want to come to terms with their bad decisions. But to give them a little grace, they made these bad decisions because there was heavy effort, time, education, and money, and all these other things, cultural investment spent, convincing them that this was the right thing to do, right? So Will just made a very salient scientific point. The peak to age for fertility is this age, and people are getting married way outside of that age. Mm-hmm. That's kind of odd. People used to get married younger. We should think about that. And they're like, no, but Peachy writes in a book that no, all her friends got married just like they wanted to, but it was a hard line. You do not get married before you're 30. So even though they're better than the current ones because they had a goal of getting married, now they don't even really want to get married. But it's all later. So, but they were doing it because they were told to do it, right?
That's right. Yeah. So one of the things I've observed is that I crawl some relatively dark corners of the internet, very misogynist, like actual misogyny, where they just hate women. And I understand to some extent because men have been really deeply, terribly shafted by this current culture in horrible ways. And I get it. And I'm empathetic to it. But at the end of the day, they are misogynistic toward women who have been told these lies from the time they arrived Earthside, okay? From birth. As soon as they come out, you are going to be a girl boss. You can do anything you want. You can be the president. You can be a doctor. You can do all of these things at one time. You don't have to have kids. If you want to have kids, you can have them after you're 40. Do whatever you want. It's going to be fine. Because women are and tend to be consistently much more agreeable than men, I think there's a greater tendency to go along with what other people are doing. And I think that's exactly what we're seeing now. And it takes a great deal of bravery, I would say, because you were talking about how hard it is. Both you and Peachy and Will were talking about how hard it is to kind of stop and say, I was wrong. I need to take stock of where I am now and fix it going forward. That's insanely difficult, okay? Especially as a woman, if you're the only one saying that, it is so lonely, okay? I'm 31 and I just look around at women my age and I'm like, I'm the only one who thinks like this. Like, legitimately. I actually went and made a Twitter group of young ladies who are mothers or trying to become mothers, because I was like, I want women who are focusing on being a mom, because I feel like I can't find it anywhere. So I'm going to go seek it out myself and make it happen, because as a lady, I feel like I need other people who are kind of on the same wavelength. And I think what's really happened to women is that because everyone else is doing it, it's become very easy for them to say, okay, this is the right thing to do just because everyone else is doing it. And then once they start rolling down that hill, they're like, okay, well, there's no going back now. And you'll see articles, usually in The Guardian, from women who are in their 40s, 50s, 60s who are like, either they're like, I'm the proud, happy wine aunt and I have zero regrets, or they're like, I really miss things like being catcalled, right? I miss the things I used to complain about because I'm getting older now and I didn't hitch my wagon to the right husband, right? So now I'm kind of lonely. And it makes me very sad to think about what has happened to women, but we've been lied to from birth. And
Well,
it takes a special kind of woman to push back on that.
but I want to ask you both this because I just realized this. You both have the right perspective on this, I believe. But as guys, we see it and we have an opinion on it, but we don't live in it, right? So we don't feel at 26 what it's like, what the pressure is like, or what the culture is like, or what the other women, what the girls say to each other. Because I'm looking at, because I think if I'm correct, Peachy, in the book you said you did have you were in your 30s when you had your first one.
Yeah.
And this is pregnant now.
That's
and
right. I'm
you
31.
said you were
pregnant.
31, so neither one
First
of you.
time.
Wow. Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah.
Neither one of you had that baby in your 20s. So what was happening? I know Peachy talks about she was just more liberal and she was caught up in the typical college weight. It was just what they were going to do as a group. But what about you? You're a little younger. So 6 years ago, what was it like? I mean, you said you talked about tying your tube. So what was in the culture and in the conversation with other women that made you think that, that's just not even on the horizon for me at that time?
Yeah, so partly because I did have 5 siblings and I'd kind of helped coach my 4 younger siblings through to, adulthood or adolescence. I was like, I'm kind of done with that, kind of not interested in that. So for the early part of my 20s and probably until I was about 27, I was thinking this is just not going to happen for me. It's not a big deal. I'm not worried about it. And I had myself in that mindset. I'd basically talked myself into it, or maybe I just wasn't feeling the maternal pull yet. Now, I'm a very disagreeable woman. So I wasn't really going along with what other women around me were saying, right? I wasn't really letting that influence my perspective. It was like, I don't care what they're doing. They were the ones getting pregnant when they were 18 and then getting abortions and all this other terrible stuff. I've always thought abortions were terrible. I've never considered that an option. But I looked at that and I was like, nah, not for me. I just looked at my own personal situation. I was like, I don't think kids are for me, at least not right now. So we'll see what happens down the road. But then I started to take it really seriously and my life shifted after that because it became a priority. And I started to notice how important it was to kind of prioritize that. And I think that's what our culture is missing moving forward. I think that being a parent has a lot of implications for society that we never considered. It makes us more willing to sacrifice. It makes us more responsible. It makes us care about the future. And I think that that's really kind of underrepresented and understated. I think the absence of parenthood is really kind of what's pushing us into permanent adolescence for us kidults who like to go to Disney still and who love the Barbie stuff. And we're just not having kids.
Don't want to grow up.
Yeah, so it's kind of my 2 cents.
Well, Peachy, one other thing is you being a little older than Lydia. I know you talked about you and your friends wanting to wait, but I do think that the culture is different from when you were in your 20s now, in the sense that then you were saying you all wanted to, like, the idea of the plan was still to get married. You just waited, but now it's kind of like, and like you said, it used to be the girl boss. You can do it all, right? You can bring home the bacon and fry it up in a pan. Now it's just like, just bring home the bacon and hire somebody to fry it up and don't need a man there or whatever. It's just like, it's like a growing number of women don't even look at that as an option. I mean, it's because of this. I think partially because of this. You're equal, you're the same, there's no difference. Not treat them equally fair, but you're the same. So if guys can go sleep around and swipe right, why can't you? So it's just we've created a whole generation of women that's not really want to be the girl boss. They just want to be the boss and drop the girl. So, how is that different from your college age when you all were just putting it off, as opposed to the, different mindset on marriage, kids, and everything all together?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think maybe part of it is because, I'm Generation X. And so we still knew we were women. We knew there was no option. We knew that we had a maternal instinct. We were just going to wait, but we still were kind of close enough to like the boomers, those like second wave feminists were like, children were still good and you still there were some fundamental things about being a woman that were great. And one of those was fertility. Of course, they wanted to control our fertility with birth control and abortion, but you knew you were still fertile. And I think that now, it's gotten so much more extreme. And then millennial women and Zoomer girls are basically taught that like womanhood is really not part of you. Maybe it's the influence of the transgender movement that like maternal instinct and femininity and like the urge to have a baby and procreate. That's not really for women. Anyone can do that. And if anyone can do it, then maybe no one has to do it. And maybe especially not women. And like kind of the essence of what makes you a female sort of has been forgotten for like these political reasons, because then once that's kind of decoupled, like, your kind of like instincts, your humanity from your physical human female body, it's much easier for the transgender activists to say, well, we can just stick these parts onto whoever, men can have a baby, trans women can have a baby, whatever. Right. And that leaves like regular women, real women thinking like, well, I don't know how I feel about it. I'm sort of confused about who I am as a woman. Yes, I'm still a woman, but what does that even mean anymore? And no one, I mean, kind of leaving feminism is almost like being a detransitioner. You have to sort of detransition, like I did, from feminism. You have to, it's hard. Like you were saying, Lydia, you have to be brave. The peer pressure is very intense. You feel like you're all alone. That's one of the reasons I wrote the book. So maybe people can know, like, I did it. Like, if I can do it, anyone can do it.
Right. Will, what would you like to say about the young women today?
One quick question that actually comes to my mind when Peachy talks about this, like the different things that young people or that women hear generationally, so on down the line. Who is feminism? Kind of like who are the people saying this? Like there's a great deal of cultural nonsense, but as a guy, I suspect me or Charles, I don't know, don't want to assume your gender or your tastes, bro. But I mean, like as I think we're a little less exposed to some of that. Who's telling women what they should be, and how does that shift generationally?
Right.
Like who says you should be a girl boss? Is that just general exposure from society?
Is it an education? Does it come from the family? Where does it come from? That's a good question.
I think like Lydia said, you're just kind of, it's in the water. You're kind of absorbing it from birth. It's not really, they're really kind of not even telling you, they're showing you. Our examples in the media, the Kardashians, Taylor Swift, like all these sort of like idols, the Barbie movie, Ken is optional. He's your accessory, I mean,
he doesn't have a penis or a job.
Right. And who cares?
Right.
So I think you just really do absorb it. It's not like, I mean, if you go to college, you're going to hear this from your teachers, from your friends, you're going to go to when you go to see your, gynecologist, they don't even ask you, they just write you the birth control prescription. And they tell you, if you say how many sexual partners have you had? If you say like, I have 100, no judgment. Okay, that's fine. Well, you should just use extra condoms or whatever. There's like no more judgment anymore. You just absorb these like this permissiveness and this sort of like promiscuous culture just from being alive, really, right, Lydia?
Well, yeah, I hate to interrupt you, but you made an interesting point. You said once you go to college, it's just heavy. It's in the classroom. It's everywhere. So does that mean, is there a difference for the women? Do some women, because like with a lot of the other cultural things, you can somewhat escape.
That's interesting, actually.
Right? You can escape it if you're not, right? So like with some of the cultural stuff, like even the trans thing, if you're a regular Uber driver or restaurant manager, you don't really hear it as much, whereas it's being inculcated there. So do women who don't go to college see it on a lesser, I mean, I know it's still in the media, but does it impact them less, you think?
To jump in for like 1 second, like the women that actually have kids in the USA are people that have a high school degree or a community college degree. Like they're not dropouts, they're not bums, like decent job, but they do not go on to American higher education. That's the first time I really thought of that. Like I actually don't spend a lot of time sitting around thinking about the fertility of strangers, but I'm pretty sure, we all have hobbies. I fish and I creep on strange women.
I think about how many babies you're gonna have.
Catch a bass, But anyway, but in all seriousness, though, that's one of those things that can't be coincidental. Like if you're a Black or Caucasian woman and you're solid, like community college diploma, you're gonna have like 2.3 kids. If you go to I looked at my alma mater, University of Illinois, when that whole conversation was going on, like to the extent they bother to keep track, Big Ten, it's like 1. I mean, so there's a dramatic impact if you go from like good CC in the Midwest to like school college. That's something that doesn't make any logical sense in terms of money, but I think we can probably figure out what happens. So
right. And that's a good point too. You say at the end, it's not even money. So they tend to have less money, but they're still having the kids. And the people who think they can afford it just don't want it. So college plays a part just like it does in everything else, I guess, right?
We actually, I think, just interrupted what Peachy was going to say.
Yeah, we probably
Peachy,
threw her off. But it was so profound.
Mansplaining. It's all around us.
Yeah, it's all good. Well, I wanted to say, one of the things that's always struck me as super ironic, and something I noticed from a long time ago, was that the people who are super smart and the people who have a lot of money tend to not be the people who have kids. And I remember thinking at the time, something's wrong with that. And I couldn't figure out what it was then, but I think
look at Will. Yes,
he's like,
wildly dysgenic. It's a huge problem. Welfare is part of it. Anyway, I'm just shut up. But like, it's biggest problem in the country.
Yeah, but isn't that different though? Now everybody's cutting everybody because you're getting the juices for it. But isn't that different? Because if you go back 2 or 3 generations, the wealthy guy always wanted to spread his seed. One of his things is like, I'm gonna build up all this city and I'm gonna build all these buildings as far as you can see. Then I'm gonna have a 97 Messiah, a bunch of kids. Now they don't even want to do that. So the women don't do it, and the guys don't want to do it.
Well, a lot of that's because guys that aren't bums don't cheat, at least not much. So your wife has to want kids too. Like there's a whole thing. Like Carnegie, I mean, I think he had 2 wives and a number of kids with each person. Then he builds all these libraries. But that depends on like your wife wants to have kids, and then your second wife wants to have kids, and then like the local associations have to be centrist enough politically that they'll take your money and they'll begin construction. There have to be a low enough number of laws that you can build a library. And so, I mean, it's a lot more difficult these days. You know, Elon's doing some things, but he's the richest man in the world. So. Yeah, but I mean, it's not just like if you're like, I mean, I'm doing okay, but I couldn't have 11 kids and a number of. There's a lot more difficulty involved in that than there was in 1860, I think.
Right.
True.
It's true.
I guess so.
I'm not about that. Well, it is okay. So, all right. I lost my train of thought.
Go
but
back.
I think
I'm sorry.
Such an interesting point.
You were talking about the rich people not having kids.
Yeah, rich people don't have
educated
kids.
people
Rich
not having
people and
kids.
smart people don't have kids.
Yeah.
Which I was like, wait, why is that happening? Why are only poor? Right. Well, I don't think that's it either, because we know Elon Musk is having a bunch of kids.
He's got everybody's kids.
That's very important to him. Well, we know that there are a few other guys who are thinking on that same wavelength, and I know none of us want to talk about him, but Jeffrey Epstein had a similar idea. He's like, I have this super seed. I'm gonna, create a super race of people. It's weird and gross because it's him, but there are people out there who have that mindset. It's just very, very rare.
Right.
And obviously our culture is not set up for that. Like Will was saying, you need to be able to build stuff if you want to do something like that, if you want to make that cultural impact. But Peachy, why do you think it is that the smarter people get, the less likely they are to have kids?
Yeah, it's so true. I mean, all my friends who went to colleges, they all had 1 or 2, and that was it. I think maybe 1 had 3, and it was like a big deal. I just think the more education that you get, and the more you're paying for the education, the kind of more intense that feminist message will be, because you're getting it from the most sophisticated professors and teachers and super smart kids. And it is a virtue signal among the elites, to have fully embraced the feminist message fully. And like, you're woker than anybody because you went to the better school, and better means woker, like then our top schools are like, everybody's a non-binary furry at Brown or something now, right? They're all like sexless, genderless. Like, I don't even know what's going on in the Ivy League. Okay. They're not going to have any alumni to ask for money in one generation. None of them are having reproducing. And people who don't get that, or go to a community college, or don't do any college, they are blessed, right? With, like Donald Trump used to say, I love the poorly educated, because they were the only ones still operating in a world of common sense.
Right.
And they tend to vote more conservative. And yes, non-college educated women tend to be way more conservative and have the families. The liberal women are, spit out 1 kid at 40, and that's it.
Well, they're not going to spend all that money and go to those special schools to sit at home and nurse a kid. So I spent that money so I can go make a bunch of money and be that boss. So I got to get back to the book. So I knew we'll get on another tangent, and that's fine, because it's really interesting conversation. But I want to know, I know people who, well, if anyone reads it who doesn't agree with you, you're going to upset a lot of them. So I want to know, which do you think would make them most upset? So you open the book with a quiz, so I want to give you a quiz. Which of these things do you think would make them most upset? The girls gone wild, and your importance of beauty, chastity, and modesty, right? My belief that I say, because you talk about it too, but I say it in the vein of they don't really believe what they say. So like they say that, you know, these feminists and feminism is important and the patriarchy is bad and when and gender, and we talked about before how gender roles are bad or whatever, except they use female. You wrote about it. Female is the what is female? It's the opposite of male. So obviously they're giving a title to the one because they're basing one off the other. And then they say women can do male things. But what's a male thing? Then you get into the transgender push. Well, they say trans men are men. And why? Because they can be masculine. And it's like, how is that trans woman, that guy who's identifying as woman, how is he a woman? Well, because he wears makeup and lipstick, right? So then they have to lean into the stereotypes in order to prove the transition. So that one.
Yeah.
Or is it, I don't know, it might be this one. Or is it, and then when I say another example in recent media of them not believing what they say is this new, I wanted to say Barbie, but it's not. It's the new, what's they doing? The new Snow White they're doing. Have you all seen that?
Oh, yeah.
They're talking about the new Snow White and Gail Gadot's like married with 3 kids or whatever, talking about, yeah, this is all bad, right? She doesn't buy that.
Right.
Or abortion.
Right.
Right. And not just your take on it, but the fact that they approach it like, you know, I tell you that my approach is always to give them the argument. So they approach it like abortion is women's rights, it's their body, they should have that right. Now, whether we agree with it or disagree with it, they argue it like it's a right. But then what they do in action is they celebrate it. It's not like I just want a right to do it. It's like everybody should do it. I use it as birth control. My 3rd abortion was my favorite one. And then they put it in all the media and everything else and they wrap it up like it's great, right? And the last example for that one is the woman, I'm sure you've seen it, as a woman standing, protesting the Roe v. Wade thing with a sign. She's standing with 2 or 3 of her kids and her obviously feminized husband. And she's holding a sign that says, don't force this on anyone. And the arrows are pointing at her kids. Look at this. I'll put it in the chat while Peachy responds. So Peachy, which one do you think they'd be most upset by? The chastity and the modesty, the calling out their BS, or your approach on your opinion on abortion?
You know, they don't like any of it for obvious reasons. But the two that I get the most pushback on are one that you said, one you did say. So first is modesty. You know, I'm a devout Catholic, so I'm always trying to, like, you know, talk to my daughters, like, those shorts are a little too short. Like, that shirt is cropped. They all want to wear what the other girls are wearing, what they're seeing, you know, on social media or whatever it is, and what their friends wear. And to suggest to a woman that actually you're going to look better and it's better for you to have a skirt that, like, your rear end doesn't hang out of, is a highly offensive. It's like, it's triggering on every level to them. Like, maybe you should put a bra on under your see-through shirt. Like, how dare you? This is my body. I'm proud. You know, this like body pride. It's like taken all the way to, like, you look like a porn star. And then the other thing that you did mention is that I have gotten the most heat on, which is my suggestion that mothers with newborns should not use daycare.
Oh, yeah, I was going to get to that one. You went
Imagine.
in on the daycare.
That's an old school point of conflict.
Oh, she went in on the daycare.
I get more heat on that. And people are like, well, how dare you? Even from conservatives. Well, what are we supposed to do? I mean, how are we going to pay the bills? But, you know, look, I mean, yes, there's a cost to staying home with your baby. But trust me, there is a cost, a greater cost, to not raising your newborn for the first whatever year or so of its life too. So those are my two.
But they're professionals, Peachy.
Trust the professional.
You know, your career is, like I say,
Lydia.
Your career is overrated. I mean, I'm sorry, your career is overrated. I don't care if you're the CEO of Facebook, whatever you are, your career is overrated. And you can realize that, and you'll know that when they hand you your newborn, Lydia. You'll immediately be like, okay, this is the job I want to have right now, period. And you're not, you know, from my cold, dead fingers, you will pry my newborn away from me. Yes, it's an old point of contention, Will, but I think that it is something that we have to address.
Well, to the abortion thing, last thing I want to say about that is it's a great example of how fast we've fallen, in a sense, in the way the discourse is. So I don't know if you all remember this one, but in 2016, Hillary Clinton ran for president. Obviously, you remember that. And while we're still suffering from the cultural loss of not having the ultimate girl boss in chief, I mourn her every day.
Yeah.
At the end of the election, she said something interesting. She was asked, and she used to say this pretty often. Again, 2016 fall. They asked her about abortion, and she was fighting for abortion's right for women. And she said it should be safe, legal, and rare.
Mm-hmm.
I would say somewhere, you all can correct me on a date, but somewhere around the end of 19 to the middle of 2020, saying that would make you a right-wing extremist.
Right.
So how do we fall so far? Like, right, Will, would you say that you don't hear Democrats today saying safe, legal,
I think
and
there's
rare?
a difference between. So one of the things about abortion, I think Peachy and Lids would both disagree with this pretty intensely. But one of the things about abortion is that in political science, there's not really that much controversy. Like if you asked people, do you support a 6 to 12 week bill with exceptions beyond that for rape and incest, but no abortion as birth control or something like that? I think it's 85% of women, something like that, that support that. The large majority of men. The one thing that's always darkly funny to me about this, by the way, is that the most pro-choice group is sort of dog-ass men. Like it's single, lower income, under 30, Caucasian and black males. Like it's really funny. It's just like bam, 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 bam. But anyway, leaving that aside, though, there's really not a great deal of controversy. So I think that the problem for the Dems on abortion,
I think you're right about the polls of the people. I'm not disagreeing with you.
No, but I'm saying
I think politically, I don't think a Democrat elected official would say safe.
Yeah, that's because they're captured by a crazy chunk of their base. Like, no, but I mean, like they really are. Like we always hear that the hardest right position on abortion, which is just like not just life, but personhood begins at conception. Like you hear Matt Walsh chopping up about this. We always hear like, that's crazy. The Democratic position from NARAL is actually crazier. I mean, it's basically like abortion fully legal until like the moment, like after birth.
Yeah, after birth.
It's like halfway out of the body. And there's and I'm not kidding about this. It sounds insane, but it actually is. That's the position of the party. It's a plank in the platform. So I think it's very hard for Dem politicians to say anything other than that because they feel it would cost them voters. It certainly would cost multiple millions of dollars for each Senate level race. And it's really problematic because I think a lot of people look at the two polarities there and feel that the parties are insane, as is so often the case. While there's actually not that much of a debate, especially among women in the country. But yeah, Charles, you're right. Like no Democratic politician today would say, and maybe it should be legal in cases of rape, but I think abortion is bad, safe, legal, rare. Let's keep them low. Condoms in the colleges. No, you'd be immediately bashed. There'd be New York Times columns and so on calling you an anti-feminist radical and so on. So, in fact, I agree with you at some length there. But yeah, the issue is that doesn't match the people. And last line, but this is also true for illegal migration, a dozen other things.
Got you. You all want to comment?
Real problem.
I tried to put it in the chat, it wouldn't go. So I'm going to share my screen so you can see that picture, Lydia, because I think you really want to see it. But feel free, Peachy or Lydia, to comment on Will's comments on abortion.
Yeah, what do you think, Peachy?
Oh, I think the whole thing with rare implies that there's a negative to abortion. And it implies there's a level of shame, there's a level of regret, there's something that's unfortunate about someone having an abortion. There might be, bad consequences. So that's why it should be rare, because it's kind of bad. It's like getting chemotherapy. You hope you only to do that rarely. And so they had to take that word out because we're not allowed to have any moral judgments anymore. You're not allowed to have any kind of shame and no limits. Everything is okay now. It's like the great moral equalizer. Yeah, that photo's crazy. I mean, those poor kids.
It's actually like Bizarro World Matt Walsh. Right,
but there's like an arrow pointed this way. Don't put this on anyone.
Ideological flip.
Oh my goodness.
Beard going on.
Yeah. I wrote in my book about a couple of women, one in particular who wrote in some op-ed in the New York Times about the abortion she didn't have and she regretted not aborting her son, who was fully grown and was like, could read the essay.
That blew
And
me
just
away.
the woman she could have become if she hadn't caved to her maternal instinct or whatever it was and had gone through with the abortion, how much better off she'd be. And she was so grateful also for the 3 abortions she had after he was born. And she says something like, I would have loved those people, but I'm glad I did that, you know, and I have my one
what
son.
Does it say to
I love him.
her son hearing that?
That's so crazy.
Yeah.
It strikes me, without giving my initial reaction, it strikes me as not very hard to avoid having 3 abortions or 4. Like, I mean, there are a lot of other things you can do in the bedroom. Like, just there's a famous picture of a woman with a shirt that says, "I'm on abortion number 21," and I always thought this was a joke. And once put a research assistant on it, and it's not. And I mean, at some point, you get into kind of Toltec child sacrifice. Like, there's something going on beyond your inability to find condoms. I don't know.
Well, I like a great segue to that. I want to talk about one of the most interesting parts of your book. Because again, Will and I talk about, as guys, I don't, you know, I go fishing with Will. I don't look at this deeply. But you talked about family planning in the book. Yeah. And one was the selective reduction. Tell the people about selective reduction.
Oh man, yeah, like you said, well, there is an easy way to avoid unwanted pregnancy and STDs. It's a very easy way. Like, read my book, find out what's one simple trick. You'll learn how to do it. It's called chastity. But anyway, selective reduction. Until I started the process of trying to get pregnant and, you know, going through all this. And I had a friend who was a medical student and trying to decide, you know, you go through all the different rotations of all the specialties. And she was a liberal, you know, pro-choice liberal, but she was doing her OB rotation and she was assisting during a reduction. And so that's when you reduce a twins, embryos, like 2 fetuses to 1. So you reduce it to 2 or to 1 or whatever. And so just witnessing that procedure, it's not called an abortion. It's called a selective reduction. You're just reducing. That scared her so much that that was it. And she's like, I'm not doing this. And she became totally different with no relation to fertility or reproduction because she couldn't handle it.
Right.
And she's still, as far as I know, pro-choice, but she couldn't handle seeing that. And I know a woman who she had natural triplets. She was pregnant with natural triplets, which is sort of a miracle. Mm-hmm. I have friends who just had natural identical triplets and they love each baby, you know, so much. And this friend of our family, she reduced the 3 to 2 and had the 2. And I've spent years wondering, like, kids know about their phantom sibling, the phantom triplet. Like, I don't know. Like, if I found out that I had been a twin, my mother had chosen to get rid of my sibling and like the doctor just kind of randomly, I just got lucky that day. You know, what would that do to my life to know that, how I feel about my mother? Like, what is that?
Now, I may sound naive because I didn't know about this. I'm a guy. And when I heard that, I was like, I don't know what your views are on all of this stuff, but to me, just reading your book and learning from it there, it seems so different than abortion. Right? Whatever your thoughts are, abortion seems like, I don't want to be pregnant. I got pregnant, so I'm getting rid of this kid. This is like, I love my kids and I want to have a kid, but well, 3 seems like a lot. That's a lot of food to buy. So why don't we go ahead and kill one of them? Which one? Let's roll the dice. That's completely insane.
Yeah, that's my Sophie's Choice analogy. You know, the movie in the book, Sophie's Choice.
Yes,
just to hand over one of her children to the Nazis when she arrives at the concentration camp, and it just ruins her life. I mean, that's what women are. They're like happy to do it. That's fine.
In all honesty, if I were the child that was born, I would probably feel very lucky. I mean, like I from an amoral perspective, I think that I would be more inclined to gamble, might join the military, that kind of thing.
Right. I'm living my life on borrowed time. I shouldn't have been here anyway. So I could jump the trains. And then you talked about aid donation and the problems with that. But one thing that I thought was interesting there, as I'm reading, I thought about this, you know, because I'm a problem solver. I was like, how about this? So you're talking about this terrible. No, really. Will, she's talking about this crazy thing of people that convict.
I read it. Yeah.
Yeah, she wrote it as a bad thing because of what they're doing to the young women. I got her point that they're convincing them that they can get, you can come back later, whatever. And now these women can't get later. They meet the man later. They can't get have kids. And now they donate all their eggs, right? So I'm like, but one of the things that the problem that it's not a solution for that part, but They shouldn't be, paying these young women and coercing them. I get that. But what they could do at the very least, if they're going to do it, is stop the anonymous thing on the back end and put my name on it. So if nobody's used it by the time I'm 30, I get it back.
Oh, that'd be nice.
That's not a bad
that would be
idea.
nice. Yeah, that is a good idea.
Real solution. Yeah.
See,
yeah.
Right.
It ain't happening though. What else did I want to talk? I wanted to talk about daycare, but you already talked about that. That it's a hellhole. Don't send your kids there. And you talk. What? Oh, here's a good one. What do your friends think about it? Because you didn't use names, but you still like my friends just had the baby and just got a night nurse and left. I mean, they wouldn't even take care of their own kids. They all got nannies and daycare and whatever. They don't even see their kids. What do they say? What do they say? How dare she? Did you move on from them anyway after you had your fourth kid? They were like,
yeah, I mean, I'm still friendly with those people, but not like on a regular basis. I had to kind of find new friends once I became a political conservative. Once I had 5 kids, I kind of, had to leave. I mean, I was sort of blackballed, not in a mean way, but I just didn't fit in anymore. Like Lydia, I had to find friends who didn't hate me, didn't think I was a freak,
Right.
who were okay with me having all these kids and quitting my job to stay home. And so, to be honest, I don't think any of them know I wrote a book. I wrote, it's my pseudonym.
Right.
I don't think they have any idea. Like, I don't think any of them will ever hear about it. Like, no one's reached out to me. So they're just like they're on their own trip.
Right.
They're not up on all this stuff. And I mean, if they ever read it, I mean, look, I didn't expose anybody. I didn't say anything mean. I was just, this is my own experience, seeing women around me, what they were doing. Yeah. And the night nurse thing. I mean, that's not just my friends. That was like that's like a thing you do in LA and New York and big cities. You do not get up with that baby. And I could never figure out, like, why'd you have it? I don't know.
Well, last thing before I get to what you wrote about, like what to do about all this. I there was one part that the woman in me was a little kind of offended by. This whole take that you don't believe that the world can be 50-50 even between men and women, right? You talked about a guy who lamented the fact that a female CEO, Fortune 500 CEO got fired. And he was like, no, she deserved to get fired. But there's a little part of me died because this woman, got plucked from this high place in her career. And so you don't think we should just split everything down the middle? Housework, nursing the baby, going to work. You don't think that'll work?
I mean, we're trying
Clearly
it now.
I'm kidding people. Clearly,
I know. We're working really hard towards that, and like, look around, like, it's not working.
Right.
We're seeing
what. Think they really think that works? I don't think they really think that, right?
But no, not 50-50, like 70-30 women, men. Like, that's what they want. 100% if they can get it,
Right.
One question that actually comes up in terms of the daycare conversation and so on, Peachy, would you still encourage women to have kids if they are going to keep their jobs, not use daycare and so on? Like, my impression would be, yeah, you just view it as sort of imperfect. But what would you say?
Yeah. I mean, yes, I don't think that if you have no choice, that means you can put motherhood from your life. I mean, I understand people that have situations, they have no choice. I totally get that. And I wouldn't want them to not to be like sterilized or whatever, but I would like them to have awareness of what this means. It's like, you need the information, like, what does it mean to do daycare? Are there alternatives that you can spend more time or little with them? I mean, maybe there's different arrangements. So daycare is sold as just a good. It's awesome. It's great. Don't worry about it. Affordable quality childcare. It's Nancy Pelosi's favorite thing to pitch. And it's not necessarily. Every day you can read another daycare story, like the daycare employee was sending toddlers like to his transgender husband to molest. There's daycare fight clubs. There's parents will switch off parents will switch off who drops the kid at daycare, and they'll forget the kid, and all those hot car deaths happen involving daycare. There's all kinds of stuff when you leave your child with like these minimum care, child care workers. So I tell people have the information, but no, they should still, I'm glad if they aspire to parenthood. And the more kids they have, the more they'll realize it's a diminishing return, and it's just cheaper to stay home. So I hope they all have 5, 6, 7 kids.
And also, then if you lose one, the rest remain. You know.
Yeah, it's fine.
It's like
a
the
numbers
other
game.
way
I
of
will say, as
selective
a social
reduction.
scientist, all that is absolutely true. I was actually going to mention the Fight Club story, which is one of my
Yeah.
favorite stories in recent media. But it also is fairly unlikely. The people in a typical daycare aren't going to be
Really?
brilliant, brain surgeons. So it's pretty unlikely your kid's going to be in a toddler fight club. Most people would
or at least they'll
probably
train
prefer.
them first.
Well, I mean, yeah, it's always good to pick up boxing skills early in life. That is true. So look on the bright side of everything. But no, I mean, I do think I'd be interested in the numbers behind some of those fears and so on. But yeah, I think most people would say that spending as much time with your kid as possible is ideal.
Well,
But the
it's
idea
not
that,
just wait, hold on, it's not just the Fight Club, because yes, that's like likely not to happen.
Right.
It's the emotional separation that hurts the child and the mother, and that's going to happen every single time at every single daycare with every
that would
single
happen
child.
anytime a kid is away from their parents. And actually, I mean, there are people, like I've read some of the literature on this from, say, Israel, and there are people that argue that it's an advantage if you want your children to be soldiers, for example, or something later in life. We Americans tend to have a kind of soft view of what humans should be. I think you probably wouldn't agree with this, but I don't know. I found some of it fairly persuasive.
Okay.
But
Right.
the argument that most parents should spend as much time with their children as possible is obviously pretty persuasive. I think most people would agree with that. But it's good to hear that you would encourage people to have kids, even if they're going to be working and so on, because that's the reality for the large majority of couples, at least for the first kid or two.
I'm a working woman, and for a long time I was a working mother. And I've been, when I had babies, I worked at home, but then when my then oldest was 4, I went back to the office and I worked there for 2 years, and it was like a juggling act. So no, of course you gotta do what you gotta do. But there is a cost. I mean, there is.
Liz, you were going to say something.
Yeah, I wanted to jump in a little bit, and I will point out the most recent topic we were just discussing about daycare was that early childhood development and bonding to a mother specifically is crucial based on what I've been reading, because I'm trying to educate myself, because it's something that's coming up in my own life. You can't replace getting up at night with your baby. You can't replace teaching your kid how to read and teaching your kid, potty training and all this other stuff that I think this willingness to put your child into daycare and the willingness to hire the night nurse, it's more than sleep deprivation. It's more than just trying to work. It's not valuing children in general, but specifically not treating them as human beings. And I think this is actually a real problem, because we're seeing celebrities. It's most clear with celebrities when they're treating their kids like accessories. So you can look at, who's that lady? She has 3 sons. I think is it Charlize Theron?
Charlize Theron.
I don't want to name the wrong person.
Yeah,
but
there's
she's
3
got,
black
one of her
adopted
sons
kids, and they're
is
all
black
being
and
raised
dressing
as
as a
girls.
girl, then yes.
Yeah. So they're being raised as girls. They're all boys, and they're just
all of them are okay.
But that's Megan Fox, who's
Megan
having.
Fox. Yeah. Okay,
Charlize has 1 transgender kid.
Right.
Megan all 3.
Oh,
Isn't
right.
that
I thought Charlize
interesting?
only had 1. Right.
Yeah. So they're accessories. It is the trendy thing to be trans. It's the trendy thing to adopt, like Brangelina. As far as I'm concerned, though, Brad and Angelina did it correctly, because they had a child who was questioning their gender, who they did not transition. They simply sat with them while they went through it, and then they were ready, that their daughter was ultimately ready to go back to being a girl. It's like, oh, hey, you were a tomboy for a little while, and that's fine. That's great. We didn't transition you. There are some of the few parents in Hollywood who are treating their kids like human beings, and honestly, more power to them, because that seems to be a vanishing concept. And I'm not sure how far back we can trace that, but it feels like it fits right into the whole abortion thing, because if you can discard this little fetus as something that doesn't matter at all, then who's to say, how much your kid will matter to you after they're born. But that's just my 2 cents on that. I think that we need to change the way, and this is going to be a tall order, we basically need to change our understanding of the humanity of children.
We can do that in 2 weeks.
Easy.
That's no problem. We can do that anytime.
One thing that's interesting here, like when Liz says you notice this among celebrities or very wealthy people. I mean, I actually think that celebrities tend to treat their kids like capuchin monkeys or some other kind of exotic animal. I said this recently, but like, look at her little ruby collar. This one turned out to be a girl. But I mean, a lot of this, though, when you guys describe some of this, like the daycare thing, I've heard parents debate since like the first round of mommy wars. Kind of, I've heard my mom talk about this. My mom was like a female executive for a while and ended up as a substitute teacher. She wanted to change the world, some other things. But I mean, like, I've never known anyone, including some fairly wealthy friends, that had a night nurse, for example. Like when I go back to my old neighborhood, which is East Aurora, just outside of Chicago, I mean, like childcare is usually like your cousin next door watches your kid if you're working part-time. So like this entire system that a lot of people have developed, like the daycare 5 miles away, parents decide what daycare and kindergarten they want their kids to go to before school. A lot of this is part of this whole process of moving away from the family. And this is kind of my whole point here, but like, mom's getting old, we're going to put her in a home. Okay, the kid's 3 now. Well, we're going to put her in a DC and then we're going to put her in a kindergarten. That's going to get her into a good prep school. Like, come on, just go play ball in the yard. And I don't mean to be glib about this, but there is a lot of these are decisions that families can make. Like, is mom going to stay home for a year or two? I mean, is there a relative in the city that can watch your child? And whenever possible, I think we probably all would agree that is better. It's just, do you have that system? And a big problem in America, especially among the two groups that make up most of my ethnic background, white and black native born Americans, you notice that a lot less. It's a real issue. And part of that is that no one has kids.
Well, yeah, we kind of got it. Look at the time we got to the end. I do want to, so much more to cover, man. So I want to go through. So one key piece was you talked about what to do, right? Because we talked about solutions. You talk about one of the interesting things is being an anti-feminist as opposed to just not being feminist. It's like the Kendi school, right? Don't just be don't be a racist. You got to be an anti-racist. So you got to be an anti-feminist, right? And you're talking about choose wisely. Will, I'm sure you like. We talked about it on the show before. The Chad guy who dated all the girls on Twitter, and they all coming out like I dated him too, crying about it. It's like part of it. Part of it is you, right? The choice you make and who you date is important. You created a term about being a husbosexual and have lots of kids. That's one of the key things throughout the book is have a lot of kids.
That's right.
But one interesting and stay at home, which he talked about. But one of the interesting ones was choosing religion. Right. And as someone who grew up, with an interesting piece, right? Because your mom was, and not just not feminist, she was an anti-feminist, but she was also a secular atheist, right? And you talk about how you felt that you did not grow up with the foundation, that strong moral foundation to fall back on that you needed. So that was an interesting one that you added.
Yeah, that's sort of like was a missing piece for me in the past in my like domestic extremism journey. And now that I'm raising all my children, in the faith, and they're baptized and they go through the whole thing, having Catholic formation, Catholic school, this is like really like the shortcut in a lot of ways. I found it at the end, but if you manage to kind of incorporate that in your life in the beginning, when the kids are young, you're going to be way ahead of the game. I mean, I do feel like no matter what happens, I mean, I could take my daughter to Taylor Swift and take her to Barbie and all this stuff, but because she is pro-life and has been since she was a little kid, I feel like that is like very, like, it's like she's immunized, it's sort of like a vaccine to the worst ravages of feminism that she may encounter. I can't predict where her life will go. I'm not going to be in control of her forever.
There's no guarantees, but it's the best thing you can do.
Best thing you can do. And I feel like once a kid understands what abortion is, what pro-life is, that seems to be kind of like a magic key preventing their detour into like a pink pussy hat march one day.
Well, I want to ask you these last couple questions because I got to skip over some stuff because I got to get to this. So why did you decide to show your face?
I was very reluctant, but then Tucker Carlson called and they wanted me on Tucker's show. So I was like, well, I can't say no to Tucker. Yep. Of course, then he got fired the next week.
See, you could have just
But my book publisher was like, you're going to go on. You still have to do it because we got to sell this book. So I was like,
that's going to sell some books. Okay. And after that, why stop? And then what I like the book until you got to this part. What the hell kind of sadist are you? You don't fold laundry? What is wrong with you? What the hell do you mean you don't fold laundry?
I don't either.
I have gotten pushback on that also, actually.
I love it.
But then I also have moms who have been emailing me and saying, this is the greatest idea. Yeah, thank you for alleviating my guilt.
They're crazy. And I almost canceled this interview when I can't interview this monster who doesn't fold laundry.
Charles, do you have 5 children?
Touche.
And
according to you, I read your book and you're telling me I need to.
There you go. Yeah.
Go adopt some. I have 3 teenagers and they each use about like 80 towels a day. Okay, so I I would do 20. It would be 20. I would need a night nurse to take care of everybody else while I was up all night folding. So I'm sorry, forgive me.
All right.
When they're in college, I'll fold.
And lastly, was the book, writing this book, a form of catharsis for you or something? Because it was funny as shit. You were just throwing punches.
Sweet.
There were all these
Thank
one-liners. It was absolutely hilarious. So was that just your way to just get? I'll tell you on Twitter. You tell this to me. So what were you thinking as you were typing this?
It's not catharsis at all. Writing a book is pure torture. Okay, like Flannery O'Connor said, it's easy. You just sit in front of your typewriter and bleed. That's what it is. But this is how I write. So it's fun. Makes it fun for me. If I feel like I can maybe make one line that I like, it makes me keep going. It's like a survival mechanism.
Well, people should pick up the book. Like I said,
Thank you.
you'll get some nuggets from it. The domestic part is there, so you're going to be a little taken aback with how many kids this woman wants you to have. I'm just telling you.
It.
But it's funny, and it's what the funniest thing about it though. I don't know if you could tell me that, leave us with your takeaway from it. But what I got from it was, with all of this traditional domestic stuff, with all this being monogamous and all this stuff that people don't like in the culture now, it was pretty. It came off to me anyway as an empowering book. Like, it was really telling women that you can control X. Just like you tell women that you can control the world by being a girl boss and being the president, you're saying you can control the world by controlling your family and sending out an army of little yous and changing the culture and all that kind of thing. So I think it was empowering. But
that's so great.
Feel free to leave us with any nugget you want to leave before we sign.
Yeah, I think it's about women embracing their real power, which is not from your boss handed to you by the government, but it's like the power that you're born with. And Lydia is a perfect example of that. She's very powerfully carrying a baby, and it's just she's embodying my message.
And she needs to get pregnant within what's the number, 6 months after?
No, we can give her. We can give her a little time.
Okay, 9 months.
Don't wait too long.
I know. We're shooting to have 7, so I'm not going to have a whole lot of time.
Really? Wow. Wow. You can do it. You're young.
High aspirations. Yeah. Well, before we close, I want to throw this out there. You are correct, Charles, when you say that it is empowering. And Peachy, I'm so glad that you brought that up, because something that people don't seem to realize about this is that feminism is the opposite of empowering. I don't want to hear how I am a second-rate man. I am not a second-rate man. I'm a first-rate woman.
Amen.
That's who I'm supposed to be, right? That's who I was born to be, okay? I want to, and if I have a daughter, we don't know if we're having a daughter or a son, but if I have a daughter, I'm going to imbue her with this idea that she was designed to be a girl. She's going to be a fantastic girl. She's going to be, top tier. She's going to be a fantastic supportive person. We'll probably look at Proverbs 31, although we haven't fully dived into the religious side of things yet. And we're going to talk about all the different ways that you can make the world a better place by being yourself. And it used to sound trite when I was growing up, because it was very often repeated. But at the end of the day, if you could teach women that they are something different and powerful, then you wouldn't have to tell them that they're second-rate men, that they have to do what men do. And that's a wonderful message. And if that's in your book, man, I'm so excited to read it, because I didn't have a chance to read it before we chatted, but I fully intend to after this for sure. And I hope you sell a bazillion copies and change everybody's minds about this, because that is so important. Absolutely.
You are an official domestic extremist, Lydia. Very good.
I believe it. Yep, I believe it.
That was a beautiful speech, Lydia. And I will just say, but I will leave you with some good news. You were having all this inspirational thing you want to leave your daughter with. And the good thing for you is, even if you don't have a daughter, you can still have a daughter.
I know. That's great. Yeah, no.
Not really, though.
Will was like, that's cold. That's cold.
No,
great daughter.
Yeah, I thought I was just going to end with Lydia's thing, but I mean, just that. The idea that there can be more to empowerment than hooking up with random people on Tinder and working in HR, I think is a dope point that I'm glad to hear. Yeah. A female friend make. Like,
there you go.
Awesome. Well, I love it. Thank you.
She is Peachy Keenan, freelance writer. She writes for The American Mind and The Federalist, and author of the new book, The Domestic Extremist, a practical guide to winning the culture war. Peachy, it's been great having you. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much, Charles. It was so fun.
From you commies who let know you can't fuck with me. I got a country to say. God bless. as the US of A. Land of the free and a home of the brave. God get all of the praise. I got a country to save, cause I'm Patriot J and I'm saving the day.